So in this slideshow covers Kripke's second and third lectures in naming and necessity. The second lecture begins with a description of the description theory of reference, that is a summary of the description theory of reference. Remember, the description theory of reference is attributed to Frege and Russell. Kripke then attacks that theory, says what he thinks is wrong with it. He then extends the theory to natural kind terms, that is saying that natural kind terms, many people think the description theory of reference applies to natural kind terms, and he then extends his attack against the description theory of reference to an attack against the description theory of reference as applied to natural kind terms. And then he offers application to the mind-body problem. So this is roughly what we'll cover. We'll start out by reviewing Kripke's summary of the description theory of reference as applied to names. We'll then argue or summarize his argument against that theory as applied to names, then briefly summarize his extension of that theory to natural kind terms and look in detail at his argument against the description theory of reference as applied to natural kind terms. We'll then look at traditional theories of modal space, contrast this with Kripke's, and then do some applications. One thing I should highlight is that the traditional theories of modal space, or in general theories of modal space, are not the same as what I was calling approaches to modality in an earlier session, so don't confuse those. Okay, so here's Kripke's summary of the description theory of names, that is the description theory of reference as applied to names. It consists of 6 propositions. You can find them at the beginning of lecture 2 in the book. So here's the first proposition. To every name or designating expression, X, where sort of X in quotes there is referring to the name, and if we remove the quotes, X is referring to the thing named. So to every name or designating expression, bit of language X, there corresponds a cluster of properties, namely the family of those properties phi, such that A believes phi of X. So what does this mean? Well, in rough summary, it means this. If I'm a competent user of a name, that is, I have a name that I use in my own personal language, so it could be, say, Barack Obama, then I have to believe that some properties are had by Barack Obama. So here you have someone saying Barack Obama is tall. In order for this person to use Barack Obama, this person has to have various beliefs about Barack Obama. That is, believe that he has some properties. And here's a list of properties this person might believe he has. Now, this thesis 1 requires that if the name Barack Obama is a name in Greed's idiolect, an idiolect is just your own personal language, what the words mean when you speak them, then Green must associate some description with Barack Obama. And Green has to believe a sentence such as the one given in the belief bubble above. Now, notice that this is a thesis about the psychological states of the agent. It's not a thesis that says the individual has to have those properties. So this is not like the claim that sense fixes reference. Remember, the claim that sense fixes reference holds that the sense you associate with a term, which we can think of as roughly like a description, determines what the term refers to. This is not that claim, okay? If this were that claim, it would have to say that the sentence phi x is true. But this doesn't say that. This just says that the agent who uses the name believes it to be true. It doesn't guarantee that it is true. Okay, the second thesis. One of the properties, phi, or some conjointly, are believed by A to pick out some individual uniquely. Now again, notice that this isn't saying that those properties do have to apply to phi, or that they have to have to apply to the referent of the name, nor is it saying that those properties are sufficient to determine the referent of the name. It's just saying that the agent believes they do. So here this person says, I believe that Barack Obama and only Barack Obama has that specific set of properties. So in order for the name to refer the agent, the idea goes the agent has to believe that. So this requires that Green believes that there is some subset of the properties that Green associates with Barack Obama, and this person has to believe that nobody except Barack Obama has those properties. Notice again that this is a thesis about the psychological states of the agent. The thesis does not hold that some of those properties pick out some individual uniquely, that it actually works that way. That would be like the claim that sense fixes reference. The thesis just holds that the agent believes that some of those properties pick out the individual uniquely. Now, now we get into something closer to the claim that sense fixes reference. 3 says, if most or a weighted most, and we'll just set aside the idea of a weighted most for now, I'll explain it later. So we'll just say, if most of those properties are satisfied by one unique object, then that object is the referent of the name. Now, this requires that any individual that has most or a weighted most of the properties on Green's list is Barack Obama, provided that nothing else has those same properties. So this is like the claim that sense fixes reference. If you combine this claim with the earlier ones, it's like the combination of the claim that sense fixes reference and the claim that any competent user of an expression can access its sense. Notice that this is not a thesis about the psychological states of the agent. The thesis does not say anything about what the agent believes. It's just a thesis about the name. In our example, it's a thesis about the name Barack Obama, not what Green believes. Now, notice if you combine this thesis with the earlier theses, saying that Green has to believe that Barack Obama has phi, and that Green has to believe that Barack Obama uniquely has phi, if you combine this with those, then you get a thesis about partly about what the agent believes. So here you have Barack Obama, here you have a bunch of properties, and the idea is that Barack Obama is the referent of the name Barack Obama let me put it this way. The individual in the upper right-hand side of your screen is the referent of the name Barack Obama if that individual satisfies most of these properties. So, presuming that the properties in the green box are the key ones, 3 requires that the man in the picture is the referent of the name Obama if he has these properties and no one else does. 4, if the vote, meaning the application of the properties, yields no unique object, that is, there's nobody who satisfies most of the properties, or there's multiple people who satisfy most of the properties, then the name simply does not refer. Now notice that this is crucial for a name. This won't be crucial for a kind term, right? Because kind terms don't apply uniquely. The term water can apply to what's in my glass as well as what's in the lake, as well as what's falling from the sky. Whereas a name is supposed to apply to exactly one individual. So 4 implies that the name Barack Obama refers to something only if exactly one individual has most or the weighted most of the properties on Green's list. So if 2 people have the key properties, then this name doesn't refer to anything. And if no one has the key properties, then this name doesn't refer to anything. Notice that this is, again, not a thesis about the psychological states of the agent. The thesis does not say anything about what the agent believes. It's a thesis about the nature of the name. In our example, it's a thesis about the name Barack Obama. Now, thesis 5. The statement, and this is a statement, it's a bit of language. If X exists, then X has most of the phi's, is known a priori by the speaker. So now we get the claim that we can access the sense of an expression. So 3 and 4 are basically saying that names have senses, and 5 is saying that the speaker can access the sense. So 5 requires that if Barack Obama, the name, is the name Barack Obama is a name in Green's idiolect, then Green must know a priori if Barack Obama exists, then Barack Obama has most of the following properties, and then we list off the properties. Notice that this is a thesis about both the psychological states of the agent and about Barack Obama. The thesis is about the psychological states of the agent because it says something about what the agent knows. The thesis is about Barack Obama because knowledge is factive. So this expression factive, I've used it before and explained it, but I'll just explain it briefly again. A state is factive if it implies the truth of its content. So suppose I know that there is a tissue box on the table. The content of the knowledge is there is a tissue box on the table. Since knowledge implies truth, because knowledge implies at least justified true belief, knowledge implies truth. Since knowledge implies truth, it's called factive, because the content must be true in order for the predicate knowledge to apply. So when we say 5, the statement, if X exists, then X has most of the phi's, is known a priori by the speaker. We're committing to the claim that if X exists, then X has most of the phi's is true, because it's known. And when we say it's a priori for the speaker, we're saying something about the psychological states of the speaker. That is, it's knowable independently of perception, very roughly. Okay. So let's look at our individual here. Remember, this person is asserting that Barack Obama is tall, and this person has this description that she associates with Barack Obama. Thesis 5 implies that the above belief is justified a priori. That is, supposing that the I believe thing is the relevant description, it's the equivalent of phi, is justified a priori, since anyone who doesn't have that belief is not a competent user of the name. This belief sentence is basically analytic. Okay. What about the second part? It's factive. Well, Barack Obama has to actually instantiate those properties. Now, thesis 6, the statement, if X exists, then X has most of the phi's, expresses a necessary truth in the idiolect of the speaker. Thesis 6 requires that the proposition, if Barack Obama exists, then Barack Obama has most of the phi's, is a necessary truth. That is, thesis 6 requires that necessarily Barack Obama has most of those properties. Put another way, in any possible world in which Barack Obama exists, he has most of those properties. You can't coherently talk about a world where some individual lacks most of those properties and is still Barack Obama. So I want you to think about this in sort of the in the way that Frege thought about it, or the way that we suggested Frege thought about it. So remember, for Frege, your name, the sense fixes reference. The name that you use has a sense. That's the properties you a priori associate with the person. In what sense is the association a priori? Well, if you understand the name, you must associate those properties with the person. So the name has a sense. The sense fixes the reference. So in any world that you imagine, the name refers to whatever satisfies those properties. So consequently, a sentence of the form X has most of those properties expresses a necessary truth, because again, in any world you imagine, the name refers to whatever has those properties. Notice that this is a thesis about the referent of the name. It's not a thesis about the name itself. It's not a thesis about the psychological states of the agent. It's a thesis about the thing itself, as it exists in every world in which it exists at all, including our own. So we have Barack Obama here. We have various other possible world Barack Obamas that are each slightly different. What's crucial is if the name Barack Obama refers to these, then necessarily these satisfy most of the descriptions that the speaker associates with Barack Obama. So if you think back to those descriptions, let's just for ease of the example, say the only description that's required is being the 44th president of the United States. Well, if the one on the right in our actual world was the 44th president, then Barack Obama refers to him. If the next one over didn't become president, maybe his face was a little too wide for people to like him so much, then the name Barack Obama doesn't refer to him, and so on. Okay, now there's a final thesis here. I said there were 6. There's a sort of condition on the other theses. And the condition says the name really only works if it's not circular. So the properties which are used in the vote, the properties that we've been listing in the green box or that have been appearing in the thought bubble, must not themselves involve the notion of reference in any way that is ultimately impossible to eliminate. So what does this mean? Well, suppose Green says Einstein is brilliant. And we want to know, does Green really possess the name Einstein? Is Green really a competent user of the name Einstein? And Purple says, well, who's Einstein? And Green says, he discovered the theory of special relativity. Well, now it looks on the face of it like 1 through 6 are going to be satisfied. So Green is going to say the sense, put it in Phrygian terms, discoverer of the theory of special relativity will be the sense of the name Einstein. This will be the property that Green associates with the name Einstein. This will be the property that it's necessary for Einstein to have, and so on and so forth. But when Purple says, who's Einstein, suppose Green responds as follows. When Purple then says, what's the theory of special relativity, Green responds as follows. It's the theory that Einstein discovered. Well, now we have a vicious circle. When we say, who's Einstein, the response is, he discovered the theory of special relativity. When we say, what's that? Green says, it's the theory discovered by Einstein. This condition C here, is just saying the descriptions at issue can't be viciously circular in this way. It can't be such a simple, obvious circle. And if it is, then the name doesn't really work. It's not really satisfying the conditions laid out by the description theory of reference. So C just requires that we avoid this. So one who identifies Barack Obama by the property being the US president can't then identify being the US president as holding the office held by Barack Obama. Okay, so now we have our theses all together here. We're just going to set C aside and assume it's been satisfied. You can think of theses 1 and 4 like this. Taken together, these 4 theses capture Frege's view of names. 3 and 4 capture the idea that sense determines reference, as I mentioned before. And 1 and 2 capture the idea that we can access senses and know that those senses determine reference. Thesis 5 adds that we can know a priori the sense of any given name with which we are competent, and that we can know a priori that sense determines reference for names. And thesis 6 adds that the connection between sense and reference is necessary, and that reference have their senses necessarily. Okay, so that's the summary of the description theory of names. You might wonder why 6 should be added. This is just something I want you to think about. I think it's a consequence of the Phrygian view, but I'm just going to leave it. And I've in effect already answered this question earlier, but I want you to sort of pause and think about why 6 is there. Okay, we're going to stop there with the description theory of reference, as applied to names. Next time I'll briefly summarize, it will be a shorter segment, I'll summarize what the description theory of reference's weighted most phrase means.